I'm Tracy Ingram, and I'm a STEM virtual specialist for the Georgia Department of Education. And I'm also an elementary teacher at Lynn Lastinger Elementary in Tifton, Georgia. So today we want to talk about STEM and STEAM for our youngest learners. Very often people are a little nervous about taking on STEM and STEAM for our very earliest years, like pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. And that's a little puzzling to me, really, because that's almost where it's the most natural. It's a place where it really just feels second nature to them to think in this way. They just need our encouragement, and they need us to help teach them how to use this to develop those critical thinking skills. So let's take a look at what STEM and STEAM can be for our youngest learners. And of course, all of this can be adapted for other grade levels as well. First, let's remind ourselves, what is STEM and STEAM education? Is it science? Yes. Social studies? Yes. Technology, engineering, art, math, it's all those things. But STEM and STEAM education is really just so much more than that. It's an approach to integrating all, or as many as possible, of the content areas into one problem-solving experience that students can relate to, because it ties to something they have a connection to in their own life, something that makes sense to them. STEM and STEAM education, it's not a what, it's a how. It's not another block you have to make time for in your day. STEM and STEAM as an educational approach, it's the thread that weaves all the content areas together for a child so that the content of the standards being taught now has meaning for them. Now they understand why they're learning these things. It's about solving problems and answering questions. If you don't get anything else from this, just really focus on that. It's about solving problems and answering questions. It's about integrating all the content areas as often as possible. It's about developing critical thinking skills while they're learning the content of the standards in an authentic way. They don't feel like they're just answering math problems because the teacher told them to. They're working on a math problem because they need to know the answer to that math problem to solve the problem they're working on, or to answer the question they're trying to search out the meaning of. So there's a reason for everything that they do that makes sense to them. And because of that, the learning is going to become a part of them, and they won't forget it. We always want to start with STEM journals. And I have heard teachers say, well, we can't do STEM journals because our children don't know how to write yet, especially at the beginning of the year. But you can still do STEM journals. You still should do STEM journals. And we really need to get those going from the very first days of school. Even with our very youngest learners, they may not know how to write yet, but they can draw. They can draw what they see. They can draw sketches to show what they have experienced. And that's a big part of STEM STEAM, is we want to give them experiences, not just things to do, but experiences. And they're going to create things. They can draw sketches of these experiences. They can draw sketches of these creations. They can add simple labels to their drawings. It's a great early writing experience. With a little guidance from the teacher, you can come up with some simple words that would apply to the experience this class has had and help them so they can make those simple labels when they're ready. And then that'll develop into more writing very quickly. You want to make sure after they've worked in their STEM journal, just kind of walk around the room while they're working and ask them, what are you drawing? Tell me about this. And as you're asking those questions, you'll be able to tell if they are genuinely drawing, sketching the experience they had. You don't want them to just lose focus and start drawing anything that has nothing to do with it. We do want to teach them from the very beginning to keep their focus on the problem or the question, to keep their focus on the experience that they had, so that they can learn to build their ability to do more work as they get older in a deeper way. So we want to make sure the focus of the drawing remains on the STEM and STEAM lesson and doesn't stray onto unrelated topics. And all you have to do is just walk around the room and ask them what they're drawing. And if they're not drawing what they should, then just redirect them gently and they'll get back on task. These are some samples of STEM journal entries that came from the beginning of the year in a pre-K class. Their teacher took them to choose a tree that would be theirs to observe and learn about for the entire year. That's going to be theirs. That was their STEM project for the year. So together, the class made a picture of the tree that they chose. Now, the teacher printed copies of those pictures, and they cut them out and glued them in the STEM journal as sort of a guide to get them started in those early days. But then after doing that, she took it a step further. They didn't just glue the picture in the journal. They glued it in there as a reminder, as a guide, and then the students still sketched what they could from the experience and labeled what they could from the experience. So as they learn how their journals work, their teacher doesn't have to do that any longer. She doesn't have to give them those supporting pictures. They can do it all on their own. And you really will see a tremendous amount of growth in them as writers and as thinkers when they use these STEM journals from the very first days of school. It really helps them organize their thoughts and sort of clarify everything they were doing, all their thinking, all their questioning, everything they discovered. It just sort of brings it all together, kind of cements it in their mind when they use that STEM journal at the end. So how can we integrate engineering into lessons for our first grade, kindergarten, and even pre-K students? It doesn't have to be that you pull out a special block in the day and hand out a bunch of popsicle sticks or something for a little STEM project. It should be something that comes very naturally with whatever content you're learning at the time, whether it's science or social studies, and definitely your math. You're going to find places where it's natural for them to build something that goes with that. So whenever they are building something, solving problems or answering questions, it involves designing and creating things like buildings, roads, ramps, any type of vehicle, a boat. They are being engineers. So the following slides show just a few examples of engineering projects that can be adapted for older students, but they also work beautifully as challenges for our very youngest learners. Well, what do you think kids love more than building things? Knocking things down, of course. So first, why don't we start by building an awesome house or a castle? And as you're building those things, use the vocabulary that they really need to hear. It's not just a block, it's an arch. And why do we need arches in buildings? Think about how strong archways are. Show them pictures of real castles that have archways over the doors. We're using so many shapes as we build. Make sure you talk about the shapes that they're using. You can talk about so many things in the process of them building this wonderful structure. But now, after we've done that, let's figure out how we can absolutely wreck it without letting our body touch it. How can we knock it down without touching it with our body? We can't use a stick. What are we going to do? Well, we can see that in real life, there are some things that really work like this. You can show them photos or show a short video clip of a wrecking ball that's helping take down an old building. Their wrecking ball is made, in this case, teacher Myra Smith at Lynn Lassinger Elementary did this with her pre-K class, and she just taped an old pair of hose stockings to the top of the door, and she put a small ball down in the foot, and they just swing that, just let it go and see what happens. show them some videos of real wrecking balls in real life and how they're used to help clear away old buildings that are unstable and dangerous now. And then talk about if an old building is being knocked down, who's going to do the work to build the new one? What are the jobs involved in building a new building? What kind of tools will those people use? What kind of building do you think would be needed there? So these can lead to some wonderful conversations that you can have with these students. And there are many, many read aloud books that you could get to read to your class to go along with this. And they will have a ton of fun discovering lots of things. You can talk about force and motion, you can talk about gravity, and it's never too early to start using those words. Sprinkle that vocabulary into your conversations and use those great terms for things so that they can go ahead and pick up on it. So here's some questions that you can ask them. When you're using the ball in the hose thing, if we hold the ball up high in the air, what makes it fall when we let go? What happens to the castle when the ball hits it? What happens to the ball after it hits the castle? Where does the ball go? Once it swings forward and hits the castle, then what does the ball do next? What happens to the hose while the ball is traveling toward the castle? Because they'll begin to see how it sort of stretches. What happens to the hose after the ball hits the castle? First it stretches out and then it's going to spring back. But what if the ball didn't hit the castle at all? What can we do? What changes can we make? Here's another idea, also from Myra Smith at Lynn Lassinger Elementary. I love this, love it, love it. She said, let's help our principal and vice principal decide on new hairstyles. So can we use magnets to try out some new looks for our friends? So all she did was take a picture frame. She made a copy of pictures just on the copy machine, put them in the picture frame with some iron filings, and then gave the kids some magnets so they could move those iron filings around, make new hairdos, put a beard on them, whatever. But they're observing some really wonderful things from an early age by doing this, and they're answering questions and they're solving problems. And it connects to people that they know and care about. So it could have been pictures of their teachers. It could have been pictures of their parents or classmates, or maybe somebody famous that they all love to watch on a certain show or whatever. But something that they can connect to, and then they can get into those observations of what happens when they use those magnets to pull those iron filings around inside the picture frame. Also, remember that when they're using simple machines, measuring tools, magnets, they create pushes and pulls. These are things that feel natural to our youngest learners. When we give them the correct names for these simple machines and tools, then they develop important vocabulary and they gain deeper understanding of how things work together. Having them always follow up their experiences by recording their thinking and their observations in their STEM journal makes their play become more purposeful and the learning more lasting. We need to make sure that we're talking to our very youngest learners, all of our learners, but especially our very youngest learners, about technology. Use the correct names for things. And be sure you use that word, technology. Go ahead and teach them what technology is, because it may not be what you think, and it may not be what they think. Technology is not just video cameras and cell phones and computers. Technology is not just 3D printers and robots. Technology is anything that helps us, that we can design and create to help us solve a problem. Pencil is technology. An umbrella is technology. Velcro is technology. Let them look at these things in a whole new way by explaining to them that all these things were made because somebody had a problem they needed to solve. Technology is what we get when we create or design or invent things to make our dreams possible. Technology solves the problems we have in everyday life. Technology makes it possible for us to do new things we couldn't do before. And our youngest learners are really able to understand that because they're still in that stage in life where they know a lot of things are things they're not allowed to do yet, or things they're not able to do yet because they are young. And they really understand on a different level about needing help doing things we couldn't do before. So when you explain to them that technology is just things that have come into being as a means to solving those problems and making it possible to do things, they understand that. And if we can go ahead and start with our youngest learners understanding what technology truly is, understanding that technology exists because people did the problem solving, people did the deep thinking, people did the work, people didn't give up, people kept persevering until they found the answer, until they found that right invention, and that they are capable, they are able of being the next person who invents something wonderful, the next person who comes up with a solution to a problem. If we can instill that in their minds from their very beginnings of school, what a difference it could make in the way they approach those grade levels that are ahead of them, in their confidence and in their just audacity to go out and take on life. We need to make noticing details and being a great observer such a part of the daily routine that observation becomes an absolute habit. You can set your students up for future success by instilling observation, questioning, deeper thinking, and persevering in the quest to find answers as something that just becomes automatic for them everywhere they go, every day for the rest of their life. Our youngest learners are so open to developing great habits if we just show them the way. Here's one you might try when you want something really yucky and gross to do, something to really make them squeal, something to make them really notice some details and ask a lot of questions. What about the exploding pumpkin? So first, you would need to have your class design a face for the pumpkin. Now, they could make sketches, they can get into this and decide how it's going to look. You might even give them some clay, let them shape out what a pumpkin face might look like. Next, your class can actually take part with you as you carve a pumpkin for your class. Go ahead and pull all those yucky things out of the pumpkin, put a little on a tray or a piece of paper or a paper plate in front of each of them and let them get their hands into it. Let them feel it. Let them talk about the texture. Use those texture words. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it look like? What colors do we see? Really use those describing words. After you do all that, they can help you separate the seeds out. And then if you're able, if you have a little oven or anything, you can take those pumpkin seeds and maybe put a little butter and salt on them and toast them up and let them actually taste of the pumpkin seeds. So you have this whole wonderful experience with carving the pumpkin. And as we know, after a while, that pumpkin's going to start to kind of wilt and droop and get gross. It's time for it to go. Well, when the pumpkin is ready to go, why not give it a big send-off? So you can take it outside, of course, add baking soda, green food coloring, and vinegar until the mixture just oozes out all the openings on that pumpkin's face. I love it. Anything we can do to get students of any age, but particularly our youngest learners, in the habit of asking questions and noticing details will help them become better at critical thinking. And that's going to help them in every aspect of school and every aspect of their life as they go forward. So we really want to look at all the content standards and ask ourselves, as you're looking ahead maybe at a new 9 weeks or even the next school year, especially if you're going to be in the same grade level you were in this year, think back over what you've done with your students this year. And then ask yourself, where in the year could I have incorporated some standards for more than one content area into a learning experience for my students? Because that's what STEM is all about. Now, there's going to be a sample STEM lesson that was used for kindergarten, but it can easily be adapted for other grade levels. I'm going to add that under the Documents tab in the Elementary STEM community, and you can download it, share it, keep it, change it, fix it so that it meets your needs. But it's just kind of an idea of one way that it could be done. That particular lesson happened, sort of just evolved on its own the first year that I did it. At that time, I was a kindergarten teacher. And we were looking at, it was approaching Thanksgiving, and we were talking about the Pilgrims. We talked about the Mayflower. We looked at a virtual field trip of the Mayflower. And we, of course, we're talking about long ago and now and comparing things. And anyway, it's sort of just a natural outcropping of that. I decided to give them a lot of everyday materials. I gave them a paper bag and I let them go shopping. They had a limit on how many of each thing they could get. We had lots of just little everyday materials, and they had to figure out a way to put those together and build their own ship after looking closely at what the Mayflower was like for the Pilgrims. And then, of course, we had looked at some modern ships because we were talking about long ago and now. Well, I also put some things out there as choices that I knew would not work, would not float. But I wanted them to have the opportunity to choose some of those things, see that it didn't work, figure that out for themselves, and learn what changes they needed to make. So they designed and built these ships. They worked on them for a little bit each day for quite a while. And then we had to test them to see if they would float. And you can use just like a Rubbermaid container with water in it. I actually took a piece of PVC pipe and cut it and put caps on each end and use that, cut the top off of it, and then just put caps on each end. There's pictures of it in the lesson, you'll see. But it made a really neat little raceway that didn't take up much room. And I was able to sit it on the floor, a little drain hole in the bottom of it that I could put a little plug in. But I could set that on the floor, and then they were able to get on the floor on their hands and knees, put their little boat in there, and then they have to blow against their sail and create the force that pushes that boat down the raceway. So there were a ton of things that came out of it that I never expected. They discovered a lot of things that went way beyond what I even hoped for. And it was such a rich and powerful lesson. I kept building on it and working with it for the next several years. And it was really great. So it's just an example of how you can take the content from several areas and just put it together in a way that makes sense for your students and what you're doing at this time. If you have not done it already, if you maybe got this video from somebody who just shared a link with you or something, you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the new things that are created. You want to go to community.godot.org. Go ahead and join, set up your account. Then you want to join some groups. There are lots of groups. Of course, Elementary STEM is important, and I hope you have already joined that. If not, please do. But there are other groups for other content areas as well. Maybe you want to specifically join an art group. Maybe you're interested in music or languages, anything from math, science, and beyond, even for behavioral issues. There are lots of groups on this platform that are there to help you. So subscribe to groups that are of interest to you, and that way you'll be notified whenever something new comes up. If there's a group that you just want to look in on from time to time, but not necessarily get a notification from, then you can join the group, but just don't subscribe. But if you don't want to miss anything that happens in that group, then be sure you do subscribe. Go ahead and start taking part in the discussion forums. This is a new platform, so it's growing and developing. But if you take part in the discussion, then it's going to become even better because we'll know more of what you need and want to see. Post comments and questions. Collaborate with other educators across the state. It's a collaborative planning experience for you with people who are teaching the same thing you're teaching, but maybe just on the other end of the state, and you can share ideas with each other. So it's a very powerful tool, and again, it is brand new, but it's going to get to be better and better because you take part in it. So go ahead and join that and make sure that you don't miss anything that comes up next. I really appreciate you being here today to learn about STEM and STEAM for our youngest learners. If you will look under the Documents tab, you will find that lesson plan that I mentioned to you. Also, if you have any questions or you need anything, go ahead and post that in the discussion and someone will get back to you. And we'll do anything we can to help you out because we're all in this together. I appreciate you and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your year.